Jon Hudson comes in for the Unbiased UFO Report, kicking off the week and all the latest news of what is going on in the UFO world. Mr. Jon Hudson, how are you, man?
Evening, sir. How are you doing? I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. You know, I know you got a bunch on your list, but I wanted to bring up just your thoughts here on something happened, a little controversial late last week when a podcaster named Kurt J. Mungle had Linda Moulton Howe on, and right at the end, he asked a question, a very concerning question, basically questioning whether or not Linda still trusted her credibility, so to speak.
No. Well, okay. So let me just say I disagree with that coverage of it. Basically, I listened to the interview and I was expecting something much worse than it was. Basically, like 90% of the interview actually goes very well. It's only at the very end, and they get to a point where she says that her battery is about to go, and she should probably go. He says, "Well, can I get 3 more questions?" She goes, "Well, how about one?" He's like, "Okay, I'll do one." The one question he asks her comes from that guy, Steve Cambion, who loves to troll people, right? And so it's a question accusing her of using known false photos on her website, and so it immediately puts her into a defensive position. And she claims to not know what he's talking about. So he drops that question, goes to the second question, which he phrases as, we assume that in your career you've had to retract things when you've made errors. Can you describe one of those situations? And after that first question, this came off to her, like she was being set up. And both questions could have been worded in a different way, in a different context, and could have actually gone over quite well. And I'm not saying that Linda Moulton Howe didn't overreact in any way. I'm not trying to judge her reaction one way or the other. I'm just pointing out that I think it was primarily a complete miscommunication on the part of both of them. Unlike the interview that happened with Rathers over, John, can't remember his name at the moment, Ramirez. To me, that one was more, I think in hindsight, you might go back and say, I could have done things better. I think in the case of the Theory of Everything interview, honestly, I think it was all perfect storm of really bad luck.
Well, the one thing about it that I will say is Kurt J. Mungle is known for very softball questions. And to kind of hit Linda Moulton Howe, who's 80 years old, sure, with a credibility question to kind of end the night. It was, I just, I'm going to save my opinion for it because we do have to move on. But I will say this, he has taken a lot of heat from the UFO community, supporters, and even from some detractors on that question regarding it. I just feel that was it was a good question, could have been worded differently.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing is both. I mean, the thing is that you could have rephrased the first question to be, how do you deal with it when you've had photos that you've relied on as trustworthy, and later on you find out that they're not? How do you handle that situation, right? Like that would be a reasonable. And the other one would be a more positive one to say, hey, look, we know you've had to make corrections in the past, and we all have trouble with that. We assume that you've handled it beautifully and learned from it. Can you give us one of your favorite examples of where you've made a mistake and you've come out ahead over it? I mean, you could have asked that in very different ways that would have resulted in completely different results. And once again, I'm not trying to, I think the two interviews are very different. I think in the case of Kurt and Linda, I think it was just a few little mistakes and just human error and just bad luck and bad circumstances and bad cadence. And I think it was just a perfect storm of bad luck. I think in the other case, me personally, I might have done things differently. But in the case of the interview with Kurt, honestly, I think everyone did as best they could in the situation they were in.
Well, I think so. But you know what? Tough questions need to be asked, John. A lot of these people do kind of get away with softball questions.
But the challenge is that people tend to intertwine tough questions with tough tones, and that becomes the problem. is tough questions are not only needed, they're kind of the only questions that are worth talking about, right? I mean, those are the fun ones, right? That's where like stuff happens, right? So that's the stuff you want to get to, but it's got to be done in a way that makes everyone feel safe and welcome and comfortable.
Well, I mean, everybody has their own style. That is one thing. And I watch Steve Campion's Truth Seekers quite a bit. There's a lot of stuff he does that I think, man, this guy's got some great points and great takes on things. And
I agree.
I listen to other stuff that it absolutely makes me cringe.
Sure.
But on the flip side, there's going to be people who do that to this show as well.
Oh,
They're
absolutely. No, I know,
really
absolutely. Oh no, and in the case of both the Linda and Kurt thing and the thing with Ramirez and Rather, you had people on both sides saying, "Oh, this person was actually behaving perfectly, and this person seemed a little off." And I mean, you have opinions all over the map, and there's no way to know who's correct.
All right, let's move on, man. Let's move on because we do got to get to some other topics tonight. Gary Nolan is back in the news. All right, talking about maybe playing with some anomalous type of chemicals and isotopes.
Yeah. So basically, just a fair announcement. This is going to be the Gary Nolan week. The rest of the week will be all about Gary Nolan, and I'm very excited about this. So bear with me. Okay. So first off, I linked the interview that most of this is coming from, and so I encourage everyone to check it out. So the first thing that he goes over is what specifically are we talking about when we're talking about isotopic ratio differences that are found in UFO recovered material. And he got to wonderful specifics that I've never heard anyone get into before. And that is, he said that the thing you have to realize is that if you go out and you take a sample of magnesium from Earth, from the moon, from Mars, from the Oort belt, you go anywhere in our known, and you grab a sample of magnesium. And what you will find is you'll find three different types of magnesium, three isotopes, magnesium 24, 25, and 26. And they're usually in a distribution of magnesium 24 at about 80%. I believe 25 is at 11 and 26 is at 9. I might have gotten the last two reversed. But the point is it's 80, and then the second two are like piddles, right? This sample that was recovered from Ubatuba, it was recovered from, there was a fisherman that saw a glowing object in the sky that released an object. The object then exploded, and the material that fell to the ground after that explosion, the fisherman recovered and took to two scientists he knew and asked what the hell it was. And essentially that ended up in the hands of Jacques Vallée, which then ended up in the hands of Gary Nolan. And that sample has a distribution of, instead of 80%, 11%, 9%, of 60%, 20%, and 10%. Which one, like, we don't know why you, like, we don't even know how you do that was one thing, right? Like, but the bigger question, and what I want to get to in a second, but I want to finish something first, is why, right? But the thing is, before I get there, is that this is basically material that came with pretty good chain of authority, and basically he analyzed it using that very high end analysis tool that we've talked about before. And once again, it's not to say, I think some people were I know I was confused at one point. It's not to say that we see different isotopes of magnesium. It's not to say that we suddenly start seeing magnesium 29 and magnesium 21, right? It's that we're seeing the distribution of those isotopes in completely different ratios that we've never seen before, that we've never seen anywhere else in our known universe before. And so it's super freaking odd, right? I mean, just like super odd. And before I get on to the question, please, like, I'm getting very excited, so I apologize.
You geek out, man. This is way above my pay grade here.
Yeah. So any questions or anything, or is it making sense to you so far?
I am so far away from science, man, that I'm still trying to catch up. So
Okay.
What I do know about Gary Nolan, though, is that he is testing all sorts of substances as well as people regarding contact with UFOs. And I do know he has allegedly been working on some materials recently regarding some sort of artifacts that have apparently come from crash debris.
Yeah. So basically the catalyst for this interview is this work that he's working on now, but as well as this published peer review paper that recently came out, which I'll talk about in a second. But what to me what was really thought provoking about Gary Nolan's interview is the way he approaches this problem, and because most people would essentially immediately go to, how would you go about making that? What is the process for making it, and so forth. But the thing is that perhaps you're asking the wrong question. Perhaps what you're looking at isn't actually a finished product, right? Perhaps what you should be looking at is what sort of processes might exist where this would be the outcome of that process, where this would be the result, the remainder of that process. And so take a look at it from that point of view. And it's not to say that that's the right solution, right? And and that might be, honestly, that one could be a simple solution. Let's say you had a problem where you needed to have a whole bunch of really, really pure magnesium 24, and you had some filtering process, and the resulting mix, you ended up with a lower mix of 24 because you took some of it out. That could be that. It could be something that simple, right? Or it could be a complicated combustion, some sort of an internal, reactor process that then results in this. Because in the case of this one, of the Ubatuba one, it was shot out of the back of this object, then exploded, and the sludge that fell from that is what we got. So you're not talking about, top shelf stuff.
For the majority of this planet, like myself, that has absolutely no clue what magnesium 24 is, fill me in here. Help me out. Scratch my back a little.
Okay. So basically, when you have a molecule of something of magnesium, right, like on a periodic table, right, there are multiple configurations of that, right? So there are multiple ways to put magnesium atoms together in a way that they create that geometric thing that you saw in high school that becomes stable, right? And there's multiple configurations of magnesium. One of them is magnesium 24, one of them is called magnesium 25, and one of them is called magnesium 26.
So this alien craft, or whatever it was, as I'm trying to paint a picture here for us laymen who don't really understand the science behind it, because I am so not a science guy. This magnesium 24 or 25 that you're talking about came out of an aircraft, some sort of craft, potential UFO, and it shot out and exploded in the atmosphere, and this is kind of what melted down to the ground.
Yeah, not super high in the atmosphere. The understanding is this basically this is a fisherman in Ubatuba, Brazil, on a body of water. The glowing object came above the water, and basically ejected something behind it. That object then exploded, and the debris that fell after that explosion is what the fisherman then grabbed and took with him.
Okay, so the fisherman recovered this. How did it get into Gary Nolan's hands?
So essentially, it was shown to a couple of scientists, and then it I believe it ended up in a museum for a while, and finally, in the end, Jacques Vallée took possession of it. And Jacques Vallée, I believe Jacques Vallée actually is the one who owns the material at this point, or is at least the custodian of it, because I know he went down to Ubatuba, Brazil, to collect this material.
Right. We got 90 seconds left. So why is this study that Gary Nolan is doing important towards UAP studies?
Because essentially what he's trying to do is provide the and there's more to it, which I'll get to after the break. But what he's trying to do is provide, when people say, hey, we're seeing things that we know can't be made here, right? Or it can't be made by us. And people go, well, how do you know that, right? Like, how can you know that? How can you know that no one else has invented this? Well, these are the specifics of the way we start to determine that what we're finding isn't made by people we normally hang out with.
But it is interesting to me, as we got about 40 seconds left, that magnesium is a compound that they are using, they being the extraterrestrials or whatever that craft was, considering we could find that here on Earth as well. Normally,
Well,
we think.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, but I mean, that's the thing, is that we all use the same elements.
But we don't know what other elements are out there, though. So that one's actually kind of surprising to me.
Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that the elements we have aren't the elements we have because we made them. It's what our reality is built out of. So,
True.
Most reality is built out of similar things.
All right. We're talking isotopes. We're talking science. We're talking magnesium-24 apparently dropped out of the back of a UFO that seemed to have farted its own stuff all over the place. That's kind of where we are.
Yes, and the excitement continues because what we also got and once again I encourage everyone to really listen to this interview and I'll provide a link to it. Is we get some more information out of Dr. Gary Nolan on what the details are of the peer-reviewed paper. So it turns out that the material that the peer-reviewed paper was done on came from Council Bluff, Iowa. It involved a case in the 1970s of 6 to 7 simultaneous witnesses where 30 pounds of molten, incompletely melted material was ejected from a hovering craft and recovered. And this material did not appear to have any of the odd isotopic ratios that the other material had. However, the makeup that it did have, the fact that it was, basically what Nolan said is that it looked like a half-made smoothie. It looked like someone was mixing up something and didn't finish and threw it out. Like that's how it seems because it's partially melted. So it's almost like someone was doing a process and the process didn't finish. And so essentially this is the material from the Council Bluffs, Iowa incident that Gary Nolan and Jacques Vallée wrote their paper on. And it turns out that paper went through a 2-year review process before it was actually finally published. The paper is out now. Unfortunately, it's behind an academic paywall, but I'm trying to find a public source for it so I can share it with folks.
No, very true. Okay, so we seem to have this problem of UFOs spitting up this material. And how big of a clue is this to what they are doing? Because even going back to 1967 with the Stefan Mikulik case at Falcon Lake, he said the UFO actually was dropping some sort of material on the ground as well.
Yeah, I know. And, I really struggle with this one because, first off, I would like to assume that you get to an efficiency point in the future where you aren't ejecting a bunch of crud out of your engines anymore, right? At the same time, if you want to create some analogy, is this akin to a bunch of ants gathering a bunch of motor oil that's been dropped at a stoplight and saying, ooh, look, motor oil from the gods, right? And only some cars drop it because only some people have leaks. I mean, it's like, is it that just like useless, from that point of view, and that, I no one knows. Or is it a gift? Some people think it's an intentional gift.
Could be.
Well, honestly, we know so little. For all we know, the creatures inside these ships could be metal, and this could be what they let go of after a big meal. Who knows?
Aliens dropping magnesium, much like an airplane would drop its droppings over the ocean or someplace to lighten up the load.
I don't know, man. I don't know. This one personally, like I applaud people like Gary Nolan for following the science, because I have to admit, me personally, I would have this horrible inclination to tell people, okay, I'm sorry, this whole like fell from the UFO. I don't want that crap. I want real. I want material from the craft, from the finished product. Don't give me this low yuck.
According
But
to 11, Gary Nolan kind of suggests that the isotopic enrichment could be the waste product of a very high energy process.
Sure, absolutely. What's
your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's entirely possible. Unfortunately, I mean, look, this is a fantastic thought exercise to be going into, because it might lead us to the right answer, right? I mean, for example, if we found, four different sludge outcomes that all turned out to be from the same process, right? Like that would be hugely valuable, right? So I mean, there's lots of things that we could glean from this, and it might end up being really, really obvious. But I don't know like how specific you can really get as far as guessing what it's coming out of, right? Because I mean, even if you got like the kind of exhaust that comes out of a modern combustion engine car, if you took that exhaust, you couldn't say for absolutely sure that came from a combustion engine. There are other ways you could create that output. So, it's challenging.
Has there been any results of radioactivity regarding the samples that have been tested?
So I don't know. I don't know of any. I don't know. I've never heard of specifically of any material that it has been recorded as being radioactive. However, with that said, Gary Nolan is also the individual who has been looking at the brain makeup of contactees and looking at the effects of radiation on them. And so I have to believe that if anyone is going to be keeping an eye out for that sort of thing, it would be Dr. Nolan.
Yeah, the reason why I ask is going back to the Stefan Mikulik case, which I think is still one of the best out there 55 years later regarding radioactivity. I mean, he had those radioactive burns on his skin that, formed a dot pattern on his chest, along with his clothes being burnt. And many people who have had interaction with UFOs claim to have radioactivity.
Look, Rendlesham.
Rendlesham.
I mean, that was some form of radiation, right? I mean, it's yeah, no, totally, no, and the thing is that it's I don't know. I guess at some level, when we start seeing some things like this, I think for me it takes some of the shininess out of this whole delusion, because it kind of implies that these others perhaps aren't as advanced as I'm hoping they are.
Does it lend a thought that these craft may not be as far off than what we have right now, considering, or is it that these craft are so sophisticated that you have to have a real high energy engine, or if that's what you could call what they're I don't even know what I'm saying here regarding this.
No. I mean,
I did have a power thought, and then it kind of disappeared.
It's all good.
Because I don't think they have an actual engine on there. Like, does this thing got a Hemi or anything like that? I'm sure it's not a 5.7 liter, right?
No, but I mean, technically, the nuclear reactor in a nuclear submarine is an engine, right? I mean, it's like,
right.
It's like, but it's not really. It's the energy that fuels the engine. But I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it's part of the system. It's important to the system. And the thing is that I personally, I guess what I'm saying is I think we need to be very careful how much we infer from the material. I think that there's more we can there's more we can infer from it than we previously thought. But I don't think that it's going to tell us the integral the intricate details of what's being done. However, I'd be happy to be wrong.
Apollo 11 says, based on where they came from, it may not have been too big of a technological challenge for them to get here compared to us and what it would take to get there.
That's even possible. I mean, honestly, like there's so many possibilities. I mean, let's face it, like all of our ideas of distance between other planets are all assuming that the people coming here are coming here and planning to go back. But if you have a vessel in space or a group of vessels in space that are migratory groups where their home world is no longer there or no longer habitable, and they're just looking for a new place to go, they will travel much further and for a much longer period of time than others will because they don't have a choice.
Could be. Fedora John, another excellent following here on the Unbiased UFO Report. You blew my mind. I didn't know a thing that you were talking about tonight. And yeah, I showed my science tonight, which is why I don't talk science on this show. You schooled me, man. Schooled me. I appreciate it.
Well, Dave, you're never too old or too young to get back into science. So, maybe we'll get you talking geek soon.
It is my personal refusal to do it. I'll stick with the woo, man. I'm way more comfortable with the woo than the who, what, where, when, why, and how. That's why I have you and Science Bob around here.
There you go. Well, thank you much, sir. And thanks everyone for hanging out.